I would say, with the signals we've had in the last, couple of months, including like BlackRock signaling that they're coming in, including PayPal signaling that, essentially launching their payment rails. I think 2 years from now, you probably have a lot more adoption.
Hey folks, Flo here with Blockchain North. We're here at Futurist 2023. I'm here with Didier Lavallee, CEO of Tetra Trust. Why don't you give us a 30 seconds introduction along the lines of who, what, and why?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So my name is Didier Lavallee. I'm the CEO of Tetra Trust. I'm a reform banker. So I've been in this space for, I want to say, about 2 years now. Tetra is Canada's only licensed custodian. So what that really means is we are a regulated trust company that allows to essentially store digital assets for institutional clients. We work really hard to get our license. We work with accredited investors, so we're a B2B business. We are looking to really improve the custodial offering in the country because a lot of, unfortunately, the assets are staying in other jurisdictions at the moment.
So you've already partially answered my question, but I'll still ask it so you can provide more details. So as one of the only trust company licensed for digital assets in Canada, could you maybe explain a little bit the relationship between trust and crypto?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the reality is people have had assets for hundreds of years, and people have trusted a trust infrastructure for hundreds of years as well. What you don't really know is if you own, fixed income or equities as a vehicle, there's a trust entity that's always on the back end of, the banking or the wealth management provider you might be using.
What we would call a counterparty?
Yeah, exactly. So typically you have the platform that faces the client, and then behind you have a third party that's act as a custodian of the assets. That's always behind a trust structure, and the reason is it behind a trust structure is because we at Tetra or any other trust has no legal right. We have no legal rights over the assets. So it's actually a structure that's been in place for, again, hundreds of years. The crypto ecosystem with the failures like FTX, etc., what you realize is that you need a trusted custodian behind, right? You need somebody that's safeguarding the assets to make sure that, if there's some kind of foul play in the ecosystem, well, the assets are secure because they're sitting in a trust structure.
Now, the first thought that comes to my mind is that Canada is a pretty trusted country when it comes to its financial system compared to most others, probably. I think 2008 was a good example that's often cited. Does that mean that Canadians should consider keeping their digital assets in Canada, notwithstanding perhaps some fiscal implications?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say a couple of things. When it comes to crypto, not your keys, not your coins, I think that's the ethos, right? So, I would say, like even myself, the first thing is probably self-custody. Now, not everybody wants that responsibility, right? And more importantly, there are some platforms that are coming up with some very interesting, product offering that you might want to keep the assets on the platform. So I would say absolutely having a trusted third-party custodian behind the platforms is important. I would say when it comes to custody, what's really intriguing is without calling any platforms out in Canada, the majority of the ecosystem is still sitting with U.S. custodians. And to us, that's very dangerous, and that's why, the regulators have granted a license to Tetra, but they're also, doing this very carefully, right? It comes with a lot of responsibility to be entrusted with that. But over time, we think more assets come to Canada. Canada's a great jurisdiction. It is financially stable, but it's also conservative. So there's a trade-off that happens there. And I think we all talk about it very publicly, whatever platform you listen to or when we're on stage. The regulators move at a snail's pace, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? So if you look at 2 years ago, there was one regulated platform. If you look at now, you have 10 in the process. WonderFi has 4 regulated platforms under its umbrella. So I think we've come a long way, and the Canadian regulators are making sure that these platforms are going to be around for the next decade.
So why is it a bad idea or not so favorable for trust to be held in the US, for example? The US seems like a safe market, I guess, for most Canadians.
Yeah, so I think it's a terrific question. So ultimately, asset ownership when it comes to crypto is where the keys that control the assets reside, right? So Tetra is very specific there because our keys are sitting in Canada. So we give transparency to our clients that basically, our keys are separated across the country. No single individual can reconstitute the keys, therefore access the assets. When it comes to the US, the problem with using a US platform is essentially that the keys or the ownership right of the assets are sitting on the US. Now, a lot of these platforms are also regulated by US regulators, and I think anybody can pull up some headlines and see what's happening with, the SEC, Gary Gensler, a little bit of a witch hunt, I would maybe say, that's going on, right? So you don't really know where regulation's gonna end up. So that's the first piece, is how do you predict where a regulatory body will evolve to? I don't think you can. The second piece is in the event of something like a bankruptcy, so an FTX or a Celsius. I mean, we've seen a lot of examples. If the assets are in the US and you're a Canadian interacting with those assets, then you have to go fight for your right to have those assets in another jurisdiction. And that becomes a problem because of jurisdictional conflict, because they might not recognize that you are the legal owner. And there's actually quite a few examples of that happening at the moment with Celsius, where Canadians are out for their assets and they will currently have no right to get them back.
So if we were to compare this with gold, you'd want to have your gold in a vault in a bank in Canada?
Yes, and preferably under the mattress.
Right, and not gold.
Yeah, exactly.
So regulation is obviously the talk of the town here, everywhere. I mean, it seems to be one of the biggest remaining barriers to broader crypto adoption. How is the trust world regulated actually, and what are some of the trends? Is it actually quite static, or are things actually moving?
I would say the framework is unfortunately a little static, and what I mean by that is, you really just have the same framework that's been applied for, I think the Loan and Trust Act is probably from the 30s, don't quote me on that, right? But it's a framework that's been around for quite some time. So I would say it's a little bit static. A lot of players are very well established. These are brands that you would know very well. An organization like my previous employer, RBC, operates a trust. You don't really interact with it or see it, but the reality is that it's in behind their infrastructure. I would say there's probably some evolution that needs to happen in digital assets. The reality is the way the regulatory framework is built today, there's a lot of implication in terms of how big financial organizations are, how long they've been around, what's their balance sheet side, and as we continue to build a digital asset ecosystem, you have to adapt the framework for this kind of asset, which I think doesn't really fit in the previous framework. So the good news is the regulators are open-minded in Canada. They're willing to work with the industry. They're bringing us to the table for consultation. And I think, my interaction with them has been absolutely positive, as long as you stay on the right side of the line, right? So there's room to go or grow in the trust evolution, but I would say it's going to happen a little bit with time. And the other thing is, I think there's a willing party on the other side as well.
Well, that's good news. Okay. And would you say Tetra Trust is more of a finance company or a tech company? And if you're more on the tech side, or if you have quite a tech stack, maybe you could describe it for us.
Yeah, so I would qualify us as probably both. I think it would be important to say that first and foremost, like Tetra's a regulated trust. So we are a financial service company first and foremost.
Regulated as such.
And regulated as such. And what makes us different from, let's say, a pure technology company is we have the regulation, we have the governance, we have the compliance, and the team in place, right? Now, we also work with technology partners. So the way we view the world right now is there's going to continue to be good and bad providers that show up over time. And we want to try to be as provider as agnostic as possible. So where Tetra is really specialized in their technologies in the middleware section. So essentially the engine that faces the client, but also sits on the back of, or on the front of all the technology that we use, right? And we specialize in really that middleware, that customer experience, those API connections, that reporting that you need from a regulatory standpoint. And from that, we're doing a lot of innovation. We're doing a lot of firsts, I would say, in the country.
Example?
So for example, we got the first staking service license for a custodian in the country a couple of months ago, so we're very excited about that. So we can now go and offer staking to our clients. Now again, we're not running nodes ourselves, and there's a couple of reasons why that, including regulatory reasons, but we are working with best-in-class providers today. Now tomorrow, best-in-class providers might be completely different, And what's really good about Tetra is really provider agnostic, right? So we are looking to offer the best possible experience to our clients and making sure that they have everything they need. Again, if you look at staking as an example, reporting staking is very complex. What you need to do to the regulator. Nobody's really built that reporting structure, and we have. So that's really what makes us unique from a technology perspective.
Unique just in Canada or unique globally?
Yeah, it's actually interesting. I would say unique globally. A lot of people have been focused on running the nodes, not so much the compliance piece. As a regulated entity, we're thinking about the compliance first because we're not running, let's say, the nodes as an example, right? So it does put us in a unique position. I know of one other custodian that is taking, a fairly similar approach, but they're a little bit behind on staking.
And finally, what are your surest predictions for the crypto world in the next 2 years?
That's a great question. Well, I don't think it's going anywhere, so I don't know if that's a prediction or not.
I think everyone at this conference would agree with you.
Yeah, exactly. But two, I would say, with the signals we've had in the last, couple of months, including like BlackRock signaling that they're coming in, including PayPal signaling that, essentially launching their payment rails. I think 2 years from now, you probably have a lot more adoption, right? You have adoptions from large asset managers, large banks, and I think people actually start paying with crypto more frequently than you do today.
Thank you very much, Didier.
Thank you.